Which undrafted free agents will make the biggest impact for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2022? And is Mike Hilton the best slot corner in the NFL? Plus, Andrew Whitworth apparently wrote a letter to Mike Brown threatening to just leave back in 2015. We'll get into all of it today on Locked On Bengals.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for following. Thank you for turning alerts on so you know exactly when we upload our episodes every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. James, today we're going to dive into a offseason grab bag of topics. One we've been talking about for a while off the air that we're finally going to record today, and that's going to be about which college free agent signees for the Bengals this year have the best chance of making the team and the best chance of making an impact. Now, you've been there and you've been watching these practices. You're seeing who's getting reps where, who's looking like they're moving well, like an NFL athlete. So let's start with your firsthand observations. Which guys have stood out to you so far in these open Tuesday practices?
I have five guys that I think realistically, based on position, potential need, all of these things, I think have a chance to go from undrafted to 53-man roster. And there are others that could do it. I'm not saying that the other guys, if you're undrafted free agents right now listening to the pod, don't club me in the locker room because I don't think you have a chance to make the team. But let's be honest, the odds are against you. So with that said, five guys. And why not start with someone that I think has went under the radar for most? And we're going to start in the trenches, and we're going to start with the defensive line, not the offensive line. And it's Tariquius Tisdale. And I probably screwed up his first name, but you can correct me when you make the team, Mr. Tisdale, because to me, eye test from the jump, from the start, I was like, oh, this dude. And then I was obviously watching him and others at the rookie minicamp, and Zachary Carter, of course, Jeffrey Gunter, and Tisdale just looked really good. Looked like he belonged. And I was walking out to practice the other day with Elise Jesse, and guess who was the first on the field? First player. Well, there was one guy, and it was number 97, and it was Tisdale. Tisdale's out there. So I think that he has a shot, given the fact that there are going to be guys like Wyatt Hubert, Jeffrey Gunter, that are pushing for a roster spot. I think Tisdale is in that mix as well, based on his size, based on what I've seen, based on eye test. Haven't seen a ton, of course. We get that. And we'll see more once OTAs officially begin on Tuesday, and I can watch him a little closer. But I certainly think that he has a shot. So I'll start there with the defensive lineman, Tariquius Tisdale.
Very unlike you, James, to start on the defensive side of the ball.
It's called a curveball, Jake.
Tisdale?
It's called a curveball. Tariquius,
I like the chances there for him, and I like that you brought him up because he can play inside a little bit, and the Bengals are trying to find those guys that are going to play inside for them once you get beyond DJ Reader, BJ Hill, Josh Tupou, and probably Zach Carter, like you mentioned. And Tisdale could be one of those guys. It could be that Cam Sample kicks inside more. It could be that Sam Hubbard kicks inside more if they feel good about their edge guys. If Khalid Kareem stays healthy this year, for example, then maybe they don't need Sam Hubbard to stay outside on the edge, and they can move him around more, which they seem to like to do a little bit last year when they had their full complement of edge defenders. And that didn't even include Joseph Osai last year. So if those guys stay healthy, Osai, Kareem, and Sample can contribute, then finding the guys that can kick inside is going to be an interesting little challenge for the Bengals this year. And Tisdale, if he can play inside and show that he can hold up and contribute from that spot, I think that gives him a real shot, because it's him and Tyler Shelvin and nobody else that, beyond those four guys that I mentioned are looking like they're going to play inside a lot this year.
Yep. No, I certainly think he's in the mix. And heck, let's stay with the trenches, because why not? You know how big of a trench guy I am. I don't like the flashy skill players. Okay, I'm lying if you're new to the podcast. Normally I'm wide receiver you here. But that being said, let's go to the guy that I think most thought I was going to name from the jump. And the moment he signed with the Bengals, it was like, oh, that guy might make the roster. That guy might beat out Trey Hill. And Ben Brown might. And that's the part of it. I think back to, and if you haven't, you should read Elise Jesse's report. She did an offensive line breakdown on allbengals.com. Yeah, shameless plug. But the reason I mentioned this is because she caught up with Frank Pollock like 20 minutes after practice. Who was Frank Pollock working with? Oh, the centers, Ted Karras, and not Trey Hill, Ben Brown. Could be something, could be nothing. The point is that I think Brown is very much in the mix for center two, that backup center spot. And given that he had a draftable grade by a lot of these draft gurus, and there was an injury history there, and the fact that he looked at the Bengals rosters like, yeah, I could sign there and hopefully make that team. I think he has a really good shot. And of all of these guys that I end up naming, I think he might have the best chance. Certainly like what I've seen thus far, and he is getting reps and working, spending extra time with Frank Pollock after practice.
Yeah, and there's some things that he's going to need to work on, as all undrafted guys have. And a guy that I've really enjoyed his draft work this cycle, draft guy Jared. He did the big boy board, all the trench players and tight ends, and in the draft class recently went through and watched and put together a thread on Ben Brown. And he notes, the pad level is a little bit high at times, needs to refine that. Hand placement at times needs some work. And so that could be why a guy like Brown goes undrafted, who many had a draftable grade on for sure. And he had good tape out there against really high quality competition in the SEC. But you're right, there's another spot there where Trey Hopkins not on the team. Who's playing center besides Ted Karras on this roster? There's a way there. Again, like the defensive tackle in Jerquez Tisdale, there's a path there for Ben Brown to make the roster. I think that's a good call.
Yep, no doubt about it. So those are the two, to me, like head and shoulders above the rest when I think about need, potential making the roster, how hard it is to go from undrafted to not practice squad. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about making the 53-man, potentially contributing in some way. But there are three other guys that are in that mix to me. And I'm just going to group them all together. And we finally get to a skill guy. Kwame Lassiter looks like he has the most juice of these wide receivers. I know some are going to talk about Javon Highlight and how productive he was. And I understand all of that out of Coastal Carolina. But to me, Lassiter has more juice. He's coming out of Kansas, has more special teams experience, specifically as a returner. I don't really think he's going to beat out Trent Taylor as of now, but certainly someone worth mentioning. And I got two others for you. Desmond Noel, who is a Cincinnati native, went to Coleraine High School. He moves well. And I think it's a really long shot. And it's so funny because he's a Bengals fan, and now he's wearing orange and black. And that quick transition has red hair better than Andy Dalton, red beard. But this guy, he looks like an offensive lineman, moves like an offensive lineman in a good way. And so we'll see if he can threaten there on the inside at all. And then I got one more for you. And this is kind of obvious, but it's going to go overlooked in this exercise, I think, for most. But Cal Adamitis is obviously competing for the long snapper job. So those are the five for me. Tisdale, Brown, Lassiter, Noel, and Adamitis as the top five undrafted guys that have a real shot here to make a push for a 53-man roster spot.
And I feel like Adamitis might be third in terms of likelihood out of these guys. I think that it's going to be tough for him to beat out.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Third.
He has a chance at the very least. The one other guy, and this isn't exactly
50-50, It's you're only battling one guy versus, 8 guys.
The one other guy, and he's not exactly an undrafted free agent, is Abu Darami Soare, who the Bengals signed. He was playing overseas, I believe. And that's just a name that they went out and got him. It's just a name to keep an eye on, because I think there's going to be competition for the last corner spot. It's going to be Jalen Davis and Jeremy Soare, and a couple other college free agents potentially in the mix. John Brannon potentially in the mix. Trey Flowers probably safe, but there could be some guys battling for a final corner spot. It could come down to special teams as well. Coming up next, a guy that won't have to battle for his spot because he's one of the best to do it in the NFL is Mike Hilton. Recently retweeted an article from PFF Anthony, who had him as his second best slot corner in the NFL. Is he the best slot corner in the NFL? We'll break it down coming up next.
Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating one of life's great milestones, BlueNile.com is the place to go for fine jewelry that she is going to love. And you got the modern convenience. Not only do you get quality, but you get the modern convenience of shopping at BlueNile.com. They have simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, clarity, as well as the setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind, so it's made exclusively for her. So if you're looking for fine jewelry, but you're struggling or you don't know where to go or you don't know what to do, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. That's 24/7, Jake. If you're looking for a diamond, you need to get to BlueNile.com right now, and they're available via phone or chat online. Every single package comes in a discreet package. So yeah, if you're living with her, you don't want her to know her birthday's coming up or whatever, well, it's okay. BlueNile.com has got you covered. So go there now, BlueNile.com, and every Locked On Bengals listener is going to get $50 off their order of $500 or more with promo code Locked On. It's that simple. Locked On, you're going to save $50 on your order of $500 or more. So go to BlueNile.com. Don't delay. Use promo code Locked On, and you got $50 off any order of $500 or more.
Mike Hilton's a really good football player, in case anybody missed it. And PFF recently tweeted on June 4th, who's the best slot corner in the NFL? Mike Hilton found that tweet, and he said, I'm being real. It's dogs at our position, but it's me or Kenny Moore. Kenny Moore. Yeah. Kenny Mo 3 is his Twitter name. That's what I was getting at there poorly. But Anthony Triash of Pro Football Focus wrote up the list of the best slot corners in the NFL, and it is players that play primarily or most of their snaps in the slot. So Marlon Humphrey, Jalen Ramsey, who play outside and sometimes will follow guys into the slot for extended periods of time for full games at times, are not on the list, but he has it in that order. Kenny Moore, who now plays for the Indianapolis Colts, and Mike Hilton of the Cincinnati Bengals coming in at second. Mike Hilton's slot coverage grade of 84.4, writes Anthony Triash, was fifth in the league since 2017. So over his career, he was second among slot corners in wins above replacement last season, but despite being tasked with much more man coverage than he's used to, than he had played previously in his career. At just $24 million over 4 years, an underrated signing, I would say, even by us. Maybe we're not giving Mike Hilton enough love, even though we had him on the podcast and he was a great guest. So you can go check out that 2-part interview as well. Do we underrate the importance of Mike Hilton signing with the Cincinnati Bengals, James? What do you think?
No, I mean, when he signed, I don't think we did. Certainly last year during the season, could we have overlooked it some? Potentially. But part of why he didn't have any sacks last year, right, is and he was impactful and had the pick six, had the huge interception against the Titans, which in the divisional round had the pick six against the Steelers. I mean, he had impactful plays, but no sacks, and that was one of his best qualities. It's because they had to use him in a different way. And I know Lou Anarumo talked to him about that during the year. And I think that one thing that's hard, and you mentioned the man coverage, but that's hard for proven veterans to do when they sign with a new team, is adapt. So that's the part of it that I think is even more impressive to me, is that Mike Hilton, who's proven, who earned a big contract, did all of these things in the league for a playoff team in Pittsburgh for some of the years that he was there. He was able to say, okay, this is what I need to do to make the Bengals better after getting here. And this is what I need to do to make this defense better. And had the maturity and the skill set and the talent, all of those things, to adjust, adapt, and still play at a high level and make big plays. I mean, again, that Titans interception, it gets overlooked. The Titans are driving, and getting close to Randy Bullock field goal range, within the, 25 yards are in, which is what, no, I'm just kidding. Sorry, Randy. But you catch my point. And Mike Hilton made a big play there that helped the Bengals, because that offense was struggling and the defense needed to come up big time and time again in that divisional round.
Yeah, and he made clutch plays throughout the season for them, had his first pick six. Of course, this year, that's a fun one to reminisce about as well. He talked about some of his favorite plays when we had him on and talked to him about the Titans play as well. The other guys on the list, just for full disclosure, full coverage of Anthony's list: Jonathan Jones at 3, Teron Johnson from the Bills at 4, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from the Saints at 5, Troy Hill back with the Rams at 6, Bryce Callahan, who was for a while the best slot corner in the NFL. He's been in the league for a while, at 7, Nate Hobbs at 8, Avonte Maddox at 9, Tavier Thomas at 10. So 2 Bengals corner spots between Mike Hilton and Chidobe Awuzie, I think you can feel really good about if you're a Bengals fan for different reasons. Cheeto is a guy that Lou Anarumo felt comfortable moving around the field at times, shadowing with Cheeto. He can kind of do it all. I think that he's a very complete corner, and maybe we're not talking about Cheeto enough. Maybe we should be talking about him being a Pro Bowl snub more than we did, or maybe this is just off-season orange-tinted glasses talking. But between those two guys, with the versatility of Mike Hilton and the addition of Dax Hill, who I'm excited to see play with Mike Hilton and give them that ability to not have to move their corners around to disguise their defense a little bit more, maybe that does give Mike Hilton the opportunity to blitz a little bit more this year. His pass rushing percentage as a percentage of his snaps, we talked to him about it when we had him on. He was rushing the passer more than 10% of the time in Pittsburgh. And in this last season in Cincinnati, he was down to about 5% of his snaps were pass rushes. So excited to see if he gets an opportunity to do a little bit more of that this year and see if his reputation as one of the best slot blitzing corners contributes or translates to more production this year in Cincinnati.
Yeah, to me, that's the beauty of drafting Dax Hill, is because he fits with Bates, and we've talked about that, but he also fits with Mike Hilton and can help Mike Hilton, and hopefully having a chess piece like Hill can unlock even more from Mike Hilton, where you're putting him in the best, most advantageous situations if you're Lou Anarumo. So that's the fun part, is I'm curious to see how it's all going to look, how it's all going to come together. But no, Mike Hilton, he's right. He is one of the best. And how about this? He tweeted that out, I think, before seeing the list that PFF put out in their official ranking. And he was like, it's either me or Kenny Moore. And then who was 1 and 2? Kenny Moore, and it was Hilton. And Moore was more productive with the traditional stats last year, tackles, interceptions, etc. So not shocking to see him ranked 1. But no, I'm glad that Mike Hilton is second in this ranking, and he had a big first year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's even better in year 2 here in Cincinnati.
Kenny Moore and Mike Hilton were both targeted 93 times. And that includes the playoffs for Mike Hilton, but both were targeted 93 times. Kenny Moore gave up 66 catches on those 93 targets. Mike Hilton gave up 65 catches on those 93 targets. And generally, you see a higher completion percentage when you get the slot corners, when you're looking at their numbers. So if that sounds really high, 67% or so, that's why. It's just because they're slot corners. Those guys have a higher percentage of passes completed into their coverage. But I just thought that was interesting. Both those guys, 93 targets. So very frequently targeted, leading the NFL, tied for the lead in the NFL in targets in 2021. Coming up next, Andrew Whitworth recently went on the Pivot podcast and talked about his time in 2015 when the Bengals drafted Cedric Ogbuehi and Jeff Fisher, wrote Mike Brown a letter, and the Andrew Whitworth saga, as it's reported that he might retire a Ram. Anyone thinking about he might have retired a Bengal? Looks like there's some rumors that he will retire a Ram as well. So we'll reflect a little bit on the end of Andrew Whitworth's time in Cincinnati and this letter coming up next.
It's funny, Jake, because you just said Jeff Fisher, and Jake Fisher wishes he was as consistent as Jeff Fisher, 7 and 9 all the time. Because let's be honest here, Jake Fisher was not consistent, the former Bengals second round pick. But you know what is consistent? RockAuto.com, your one-stop shop for all things auto parts. And let's be honest, all right, the summer is here. And when summer's here, heat is rough on your car. And that means, well, you need to keep up on the maintenance. And whether it's something as simple as wiper blades or windshield washer fluid, or something a little more, in depth that you're trying to upgrade, whether it's just swapping out a fuel pump or anything in between, you can go to rockauto.com right now. They're a family-owned business. They're going to have the part you're looking for, whether you drive a Mercedes-Benz, Jake, or whether you drive a Daewoo, me. So go there now, rockauto.com. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Be sure to write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
As we mentioned, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one sport source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest developments, news, and odds. And the NBA championship is going on right now. Apparently, the Boston Celtics are good, so you probably shouldn't take my advice on betting on the NBA. But if you have your own insights on the NBA finals, well, they've got you covered at BetOnline. Honestly, the Celtics are good. I thought that this was going to be Golden State going away. Doesn't appear to be the case. There's also some NHL conference finals going on. Major League Baseball well underway. MMA, UFC go on all the time, and boxing. BetOnline has you covered for all of it. And there are NFL futures out there too. If you're an NFL only kind of person, BetOnline has you covered. Go to the website today. You can check it out on your computer or mobile device to learn about all the trends in the action. BetOnline is where the game starts. James, somber note, I guess, to conclude the show with this letter that we learned about from Andrew Whitworth back in 2015. He was frustrated. He wrote a letter to Mike Brown talking about, I've been here for 10 years. I've been a leader for your team. I've been a captain. I've played well. He used the words, I'm now at a point where I'm begging you to treat me right. You have a choice. The choice is to extend him. He's looking for some security.
Mm-hmm.
He threatened to walk away. And the response was, here's a 1-year extension. He got a 1-year extension, and he thought that was big of Mike Brown to give him the opportunity. He said that it was what his family needed at the time. It's what was best for them. And so he signed it. I wonder if the 1-year extension felt like enough to him at the time, given their drafting of Cedric Wayhe and Jake Fisher. I don't know why I said Jeff.
It was in season. It was in season too, by the way, when he signed that extension. Which is rare.
And that's when he wrote the letter, was in season. Just a dimension to the Whitworth saga, the Whitworth departure that we weren't aware of. And just for me, put salt in the wound, because we've talked about this recently when we were redoing some draft picks, going back in time and finding the draft picks that we would tell Duke Tobin, hey, don't do that one. Do this one differently. For you, it was Cedric Wayhe, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it just, when you see this from Whit, that adds some fuel to your fire there, James. I mean, he was the heart and soul of this team for a long time. Looks like he's going to retire Ram because he went to LA. He won a Super Bowl there. And again, like I said, just kind of salt in the wound for me.
Yeah, it's look, he wanted to stay in Cincinnati. And the Bengals weren't going to pay him top tackle money or close to it, right? And the Rams said, we will. And that's it. And so when you're playing at a high level, even if you're 35, if you're Andrew Whitworth, he never really had any serious injuries. I'm trying to think. I mean, there was never anything that was crazy where he missed a year or anything like that. And so he's like, hey, I can keep playing and keep playing. I bet he could play this year if he wanted to. And now he's not going to. Why would you? You just won the Super Bowl. And he told his family he was done. There was after Super Bowl 56, he's on the field. There's confetti everywhere. And he told his kids, like, that was Daddy's last football game. And so he knew then, and he knew before that game. But yeah, it's the reality. The Bengals got it wrong. They got it wrong. And it took them a while to recover, and still not sure. I mean, I think they've recovered at left tackle. Is Jonah Williams as good as Andrew Whitworth would have been over the past couple of years? No, but it's really hard to find the next Andrew Whitworth. And that's why the Rams kept paying him, and they would pay him again if he wanted to come back. And they'd probably pay him in 2023 if he wanted to come back and be, Tom Brady of the offensive line, which I think he already was. And so it's easy in hindsight to rip the Bengals. And I did at the time, like when he signed there, because it's like, well, what the hell are you guys doing? Just tear it all down now. Like, you're not going to recover from this. And that era didn't, but they slowly tore it down, and it took time, and it took a coaching change, and it took Zach to say, hey, we got to get rid of some of these old dudes. But overall, it's one of those things where sometimes breakups are ugly, and the Bengals, they don't get Joe Burrow if Whitworth stays around. They don't, because everything changes. It's a snowball effect. Like, if, for example, the Cedric Ogbuehi thing, if they don't take Cedric Ogbuehi and Jake Fisher, and they take Shane Ray, who was a bust too, or Bud Dupree, who's a bust too, and then the receiver out of Tyler Lockett, who they should have drafted instead of Jake Fisher. They needed a receiver then. Well, then it's a snowball effect. You don't take John Ross. You're not looking at Will Fuller in the start of the 2016 draft. All of these things change, and who the hell knows where they're at. But I don't think it's Joe Burrow. And so it led to some painful times, but hopefully that pain is gone now that they landed Burrow and Chase and all of these other guys. But yeah, it sucks. I mean, losing Whitworth, it sucked, because he was still one of the best left tackles in the league for many, many years. Like a half a decade, basically, after leaving Cincinnati, which I wouldn't have guessed, but credit to him. He was awesome in LA.
Yeah, the fact that he made it 5 more years. I mean, even at the time, right? You're thinking, oh, he's going to go. He'll play 2 more years out in LA. That's a rationalization at the time. It was he's. It sucks that he's gone. I wish they would have kept him. He probably doesn't have that much left in the tank. What would have been the rationalization that would have been common at the time? And he had plenty left in the tank, and it wasn't even a massive deal. 2017, he signed a 3-year, $11.5 million deal. If you think he could have been,
it was 3 years, $36 million.
3 years, 11.5 per year, 35 total.
Yeah.
Sorry, per year. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not saying it was 11 million total. That would be ridiculous.
It wasn't a crazy. You're right. It wasn't a crazy deal.
But 15 million Bengals, guaranteed. Like they could have done that if they thought he was a good player.
Sure. In the third year was basically, if he's not good anymore, they could have just cut him. And obviously he was good, so it was a steal. I think they extended him after the first 2 years anyways. But
he was extended in 2020. The Rams are going to have some small cap implication to his retirement because of the extension, but I would say they think it's worth it. 5 years with the Rams. And he won the Super Bowl there. Probably got himself into the Hall of Fame with that Super Bowl win. Hopefully got himself into the Hall of Fame. So it's not all bad. It's not all bad for Whitworth. It's unfortunate that it came against the Bengals. I think that
it's all good for Whitworth.
It's all great for Whitworth.
Yeah, it worked out very well for him, honestly.
Gained himself some publicity, won himself a Super Bowl. He's probably feeling pretty good about his decision. Made himself some money. I mean, for a guy that is looking like a potential Hall of Famer, he was never paid at the top of his position, which is interesting to me. Maybe back a long time ago, before some of the salaries really boomed, he was near the top, but never at the top. Never a $30 million deal like you're seeing some of these tackles signing, $30 million a year, some of these tackles signing today. But it was interesting to learn about the letter, and I thought we should talk about it. So we did. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. The Bengals practice on Tuesday. A reminder, we're down to 3 days a week at this part of the offseason, but we will have coverage coming off of Tuesday's practice, which James, of course, will attend in person. We'll talk about what we see as the offseason program continues and ramps up. A little bit more intensity coming this week and next week, assuming that these practices occur as scheduled. And we don't see Zach Taylor potentially release his guys early again. But we would probably know about that by now. So we'll have that coming your way on Tuesday as part of our 3-day-a-week schedule. Until next time, Bengals fans, Hoo Day. and have a good one.